Welcome into the Locked On Knicks podcast. Unfortunately, the Knicks 9-game winning streak is kaput, but luckily, I'm joined tonight by DJ Zullo of Knicks Film School and the Craft NBA YouTube channel to break it all down, including why the Knicks were just too tired to win tonight and what Tom Thibodeau could have done to save them anyways. That right now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, and I wanted to thank you for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day. We are now available on all platforms, and that includes on YouTube. So if you haven't seen our smiling faces day in and day out throughout this incredible stretch of Knicks basketball, I highly encourage you to check out our YouTube channel. Once you're there, remember to hit that subscribe button so you never ever miss a video. Like today, we put out a two-parter. You probably watched our first episode with Dallas this morning. You're like, all right, they're done for the day. No, but if you hit the subscribe button and you hit the notifications bell, you'll never ever miss it when we decide to go for a twofer. But who's talking to you? I'm Gavin Shaw, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster, favorite play-by-play broadcaster. Typically, I'd be joined by the legend Alex Wolf, editor-in-chief of The Strickland, but instead tonight it is DJ Zullo, who I've had on a couple times this year, and anyone who has listened know he's a guy with a real eye for the minutia of the game and a bit of a shot doctor as well, which actually comes up with Quickley and Grimes on this podcast, and a whole bunch of other good stuff. So if you want some unique insights on why the Knicks fell tonight, we'll have for you right now on Locked On Knicks. All right, guys, as promised, we are lucky enough to be joined by DJ Zullo. You can follow him on Twitter at ace_Zullo, where there is a link in his bio to his fantastic YouTube channel, The Craft NBA, where he breaks down just sort of like some of the minutia of the league and what makes certain players great. I have learned a ton from it, so I cannot recommend it enough to everyone else. And he also does work for our friends over at Knicks Film School. DJ, man, I wish you were here under better circumstances. We were just talking about it last time you came on. It was the Knicks' brutal early season loss to the Nets. This one a little better given everything that's happened recently, but still not great. But you know what? Misery loves company. So thank you so much for coming on. I guess the only place to start, the Knicks had a 13 or maybe it was a 14-point lead in the third quarter. They got up again by 9 in the fourth. They only allowed 2 points over the first 5 minutes of the fourth quarter, and somehow found a way to lose this basketball game. An exhausted team, perhaps, but what did you see in terms of the breakdowns from the Knicks down the stretch of this ball game?
Yeah, I think you nailed it with the exhaustion part. Their three best players tonight, Quickley, Barrett, and Randall, played upwards of 50 minutes, 50 plus minutes in some cases in that Boston game. And it just seemed like they were stuck in cement a little bit. And, you know, the shots weren't falling. And the part that was really eye-opening is that for the first time in a long time, the Knicks were just slow to the ball and being beaten to the ball by a team that was just playing a little bit harder. And it just goes to show that, you know, especially with no Brunson, this team's margin for error is so small that they win because they play harder than everyone. Their rotations are great. They're crisp. They don't turn the ball over, and they handle the backboards. And they didn't do any of that tonight. And it beat them because without Brunson, there, as I mentioned, they just didn't have that guy that could, you know, hit a floater to kind of stave the team off, or just even when nothing was happening, he's such a good isolation player that even if the offense is kind of meandering around and not getting much movement, he's still able to get a good shot. And with Randall not really having it and RJ really struggling in the second half, it just got to the point where they just didn't have enough shot making, didn't have enough offense to hold off a team that was playing really hard. And I think the Knicks thought once they got up big in the second half that they were going to come out in the third and the Hornets were going to just roll over. And when they didn't, and the Knicks were in a dogfight, they didn't have that extra gear. And I think it's because of that Boston effort 2 days ago just is really hamstrung them. It just didn't allow them to get to that next level that they had to get to in that fourth quarter.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. It felt like Tibbs was searching and searching and searching, especially late in the game. And I mean, part of it was they had RJ Barrett to carry them early. Like, and we'll get deeper into it, but he was incredible early in this game, 9 for 13, and then just made one of his final 11 shots down the stretch, which I had to like double check that. I didn't think it was that bad down the stretch, but it was for RJ Barrett. Julius Randle shoots. Just let me double check this. Yeah, 5 for 17 from the field. Emmanuel Quickley just 5 for 16. And I think if you're Tom Thibodeau, this is one of those losses that it sort of reminds you of the dark side when it's been nothing but positive for him for a while. But this is a game where you probably had to rely on your bench a little bit more. And initially, like on like a surface level, I was like, all right, maybe that meant like more Obi Toppin, more Deuce McBride, and that would have been good. And I think it would have been great to like put Obi in different positions, let him run some pick and roll. I know, God forbid, Obi, the guy he drafted to be like maybe one of the best rim runners in the NBA, gets to do that. Right. With Isaiah Hardenstein maybe providing a little spacing, or you go small, play Obi at the 5. I don't know, but I like the more I sit with it, like even if it had meant bringing out like one or both of Derrick Rose and Evan Fournier, I think Fournier in particular could have been useful tonight just with his shot making. And even if he's not great defensively, I actually thought he played better defensively the last time he got a try in the rotation. Like it's not as big of a gap as you normally have because guys like Quickley like just weren't as good. Like he went from looking like an all NBA first team guy. Oh, sorry, not all NBA. Well, yeah, all NBA first team, but all defense first team.
You're right.
Against Boston. Yeah. To like he was a little bit of a space cadet, and like Terry Rozier got multiple threes, and you had one where he got killed on a screen and Randall just like sunk too far into the paint. And those are areas of like mental and physical fatigue, I think, and that's fine. But if you're Tom Thibodeau, I don't know. I think there was a pivot to be had there with maybe some of the guys deeper in your bench. And also I think that kind of builds camaraderie when these guys that have been sitting and like, especially Rose and Fournier have been great soldiers, like get to play and maybe get to be the heroes for one night at MSG and lead you to a win. And if they don't, you know what, you won 9 in a row. You can afford a schedule loss every once in a while. Like when you're up, I don't know, 2 games now in the 5th seed race. Like that's just my read on it.
Yeah. I think it just speaks to the fact that, you know, as great as this season has been thus far, this was a game where you just would like Tibbs to maybe adjust on the fly. And we know now in his 3rd season as a Knicks head coach, that's not a strength of his and not something he is apt to do. And, you know, whether it was Fournier or Rose or as you mentioned, even playing Toppin and McBride, who I thought both, I know Toppin didn't shoot the ball amazingly, but he was a plus and in the plus minus. McBride was plus. He had 8 points, and I thought he played really well, one of his better two-way games in a long time. And I just thought that those two guys could have been extended a little bit. I think, you know, Julius, it was pretty apparent early on that he just didn't have his stuff. And I think it was a game where Toppin could have played 18 to 20 minutes. And I think they would have been better off for it. And I think McBride should have played a little bit more. And it just, you know, it's one of those things where like you take the good with the bad with Tibbs. In general, I think he's gotten this team to play so hard and he's so well prepared. But in a game like tonight where you just needed him to adjust on the fly and maybe change things up, it's just not in the cards for him. It's not something I don't even know if he's processing this as an option. What you're talking about, maybe playing a couple of guys that haven't played in a while or extending minutes of a couple of guys that don't play that much. So that was a bit frustrating. And it just seemed like, as I mentioned before, they just didn't seem like they were quick enough to the ball. I mean, Mitchell Robinson there was one stretch where in the second half where he gave up a couple of offensive rebounds and he just seemed like he was exhausted. And Randall exhausted. Quickly, as you mentioned, didn't really have it. And then RJ in the second half, all those drives to the basket where he was getting all the way to the rim, you know, what I think the Hornets did defend him a little better in the second half, but he wasn't getting all the way to the basket. Then he was forcing up those push shots from like 4 to 6 feet out that have been, you know, really an efficient shot for him since he's been in the league. So it's a lot of things that went wrong. So it would have been nice to see Tibbs push a couple of different buttons for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think you nailed it in particular. Like that third quarter was just brutal on the offensive glass. At one point, Tibbs took a timeout where he's like, "Guys, get it together," and then they still couldn't do it. And I mean, Mitch at points made Nick Richards look like Shaq down there, just like clearing out room. And it was like, all right, if he catches the ball too far down low, like you got to foul him. And I mean, this game in some ways it felt like a third overtime against the Celtics, except they were playing the Hornets, which is why it was still a game. But yeah, they were wiped and understandably so. And I think I always bring this up. We talked about it with Dallas Amico the other day, but Tibbs is kind of like he wants to like, this is a little demeaning for maybe the coach of the year, but like he wants to carry around like his binky or like his little toy with him. And for him, that is like the guys who have gotten him there, the guys that he thinks are solid on both ends of the floor. And the great thing about the Josh Hart acquisition was it gave him the option to play 9 guys every night who, for the most part, like, of course, like you have your issues with RJ at times, like sometimes like Obi isn't really getting it done on like one or both ends, but for the most part, like guys who are two-way players, or at least aren't utterly destructive on one end or the other. And like, once you've lived in that world and you're Tom Thibodeau, and that's his happy zone, that's his comfort place, like whatever, his McDonald's playhouse, for those so inclined. It's hard to go back to like being like, oh, I don't want to watch Evan Fournier blow a switch and give up a wide open three. And instead you settled for, like, again, Julius Randle sinking too far, like a bunch of times in the first half where Kelly Oubre was getting his little push shots to go down just because like the big was, in my opinion, like dropping a little bit too much. And Oubre is a good scorer. Like some of that is just good, like him making shots. And it's a good reminder that it's the NBA. You can lose to anyone, yada, yada, yada. But like, it just felt like fresher legs were called for. So DJ, I want to take a quick break. But when we come back, I want to get your thoughts on the good from RJ Barrett, because I thought this was, especially the first 2.5 quarters, one of his better performances in the season. So we'll talk about that next on Locked On Knicks. All right, guys, I'm really geeked out by our new partner and sponsor of today's episode, the mobile game Ultimate Pro Basketball GM. Ever dreamed of becoming an NBA GM and managing your basketball franchise? Well, your dream can come true. And this game is definitely for you. Manage every strategic aspect of your team, play through the season, and lead your team to glory. You're responsible for hiring the right coaches and assistants, trading and training players, making draft picks, navigating your franchise through free agency and the draft, and all the ups and downs of the season. All this in a challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Pro Basketball GM is completely free and playable online. Play on the go as you want and when you want to. And the incredible part about it is you get to go play with your friends. We're doing a league with all of our Locked On hosts right now, and I'm having an absolute blast doing so. If you guys listen to this podcast, you know I talk a big game about being able to manage a team. It's a little harder than you might think, and this game allows you to find out. Locked On Knicks listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On in the game store. So make sure to check it out. To download the game, just visit probasketballgm.com, scan the code, or look it up on the app stores. That's probasketballgm.com. Ultimate Basketball GM. Start your dynasty today. All right, we're back on Locked On Knicks with DJ Zullo again. You can check him out on Twitter at @ace_Zullo. DJ, what did you like from RJ Barrett tonight? Because there was a whole lot of good, and when it felt like the Knicks were going to win this game, I thought we were going to open up, spend maybe 10 minutes on RJ Barrett because he was that good early on.
He carried them in the first half, and his processing was really strong. I thought he was really dominant getting all the way to the basket, and then when he didn't, he was making these drop-off passes to Mitch. He had a couple of those that for assists and just was able to just seem like he was in complete control. And it's the game that, you know, the RJ that when he came into the league, this was sort of like the archetype of what he was going to be, where he was going to be this downhill threat, getting to the rim, but also have this passing acumen to really sort of stress the defense. And I thought he showed those attributes in that first half. And as I mentioned, the second half, things got sort of condensed for him in the middle, and he didn't really adjust towards that. I mean, he scored, I think, 27 points on 24 shots. So, I mean, it's a sort of like high volume RJ that is kind of keeps you from projecting him necessarily as like a 1 or 2 option on a team. But in that first half, it just seemed like he had everything going for him. And he really took advantage of Mark Williams in the sense that I thought Williams had a lot of trouble sort of navigating that. Do I go to RJ and try to block that shot or defend the rim or keep an eye on whoever he's going to drop that ball off to? So I thought that cat and mouse game, RJ was winning that. And then in the second half, it just seemed like the Hornets were a little more physical with him and preventing him from getting to the basket, eliminating that sort of option where he can dump it off. And it was just left to RJ to either pass that out to the perimeter for a reset or try to throw up a inefficient push shot, which he did far too often in that second half. So definitely a game in the end where there was probably more positives than negatives. And then you have the Boston game, which I thought was a big positive. So I think there's something to build on for RJ going into this West Coast trip, but would have loved to see him sort of process the game a little better in the second half. And maybe that is fatigue. As you mentioned, this team is doggedly tired. So, I mean, when you're tired, you're obviously not going to process the game mentally as strongly as you would if you, have your full energy reserve. So I think that obviously played a part as well, but uneven performance. But over the last, few games, I think there's been some signs that he's starting to come out of this rut, and he's the guy that's going to level them up a little bit, give this team the extra push to maybe compete for a second round playoff matchup. That's sort of talent he has. And He's the guy that I think can give them that little edge for sure.
Yeah, you saw it against Boston where, his north-south verve against that team with their perimeter defenders is just essential because the Knicks just are not like an incredibly physically talented basketball team. And that's obviously, of course, there's like different kinds of physical talent. Like what Quickley does is incredible. Like what Brunson does, like his hand-eye is like top 1% of top 1%, even in the NBA. But in terms of just like brute, like put your head down and like run through someone as built as Jaylen Brown and get to the rim. Like that's what RJ brings to the table. In the first half, he had that, to your point, plus the mental processing. Like I always think like him making those slip passes to whether it's Mitch or Hartenstein, like that is kind of the ultimate litmus test if he's having a good game. If he's getting just in position to be able to do that and then executing it, like that is a fantastic sign from him. And it was like kind of a great adjustment from that Boston game where like early on he missed on I think like 2 or 3 different lobs. And this game, like it was over and over again. Like he was just spamming it, like getting to the rim, to your point, like his patience and his understanding of like how to like play out the string in the pick and roll. And most of the time that was to pass, but he had one early third quarter, or maybe it was late second quarter, but I think he got, it might've been Oubre on his hip.
Kind of put him in jail a little bit
and
hit that floater or a little push shot.
And then he just kind of like sat there and the big, I can't remember if it was Richards or Williams, but he just never committed. And he's like, all right, I'll take 2 points. But his like that is what you want to see from RJ. And it's what I guess from my perspective still gives me hope for the future with him, that like, he has that in there. And like sometimes like he plays as if he's not the smartest player, but that's like he is, like he's just sort of like deciding not to always make like the quote unquote like kosher basketball decision. And I think we saw that in the second half when like the Hornets, like I think from what I saw, like they were just sending kind of his second defender to the nail and like making it harder for him to go left, because early in that third quarter, like the Knicks were just like over and over again going to, like, it was usually Quickley, like giving him a dribble handoff, looping one way, and then he would either just like go straight off that or like occasionally run like a sort of pick and roll, like where Mitch never really made contact, and just he was getting to the rim for layup after layup, and the Hornets adjusted. And for RJ, the adjustment off of that, a lot of times it just feels like it's just to make the next pass, right? Just to trust someone else to do it. And you see him, like, to your point, over these last 4 games doing that more and more. He even had one tonight where he literally just like Mitch dove, the defense went with Mitch. He kind of like half faked to Mitch, and then he just threw it to the opposite wing to Randall. That's not a play that's going to show up on any highlight tapes, but if he does that consistently, he will go for a guy who, like, for much of the year has been like the Knicks outside of Jericho Sims, like their worst like net rating guy, to someone who like treads water at the very least. And it feels simple, but it still feels far away for him sometimes.
Yeah. And I want to hit, because I don't have a great read on this. So what did you think of him on the defensive end? Because I thought, this is going to be one of those games where I'm going to have to rewatch it to really get a great feel for it. But it seemed like he was great in the Boston game on that end defensively. But I thought tonight it was a little more uneven. Did you read it the same way, or did you think that he was more good than bad on that end defensively?
Yeah,
on the first watch.
I'm someone who, unless like you're making flash plays the whole game, like I cannot tell watching it once, and usually need to watch it again. He had one really good play where it wasn't his responsibility, but he got out on, I'm trying to find it in my notes. I think it might have been Gordon Hayward, and he's done that. He did that against I might have been Ariel, someone, or maybe Steve Jones. Someone clipped it from the other game, but he did that against Boston too, or it was Benji. And like where it wasn't his job, and he still like raced out of the paint to make a play. And I think you're seeing more of those hustle plays for him. And I was kind of wondering, like, because he just is like a little like heavy-footed defensively, and I wonder if sometimes, like, I think I'm guilty of this, confusing that for laziness sometimes, where like he's making the right play and he's seeing it in time, and he's just like a little slow to get his feet moving. And that might just be a physical limitation, and we like associate him as like, if not like a great athlete, like a good one on offense, and he might just not quite be that defensively outside the fact of how strong he is. But I just thought team wide there were a lot of brain farts in the second half, and again it kind of just boils down to a tired team. But DJ, what'd you see from Emmanuel Quickley in this one? I mean, coming off the best game of his career, obviously got up to a very cold start shooting the ball, and then it felt like he was able to kind of like to do some better things as the game went along.
Yeah, he had that stretch early on. I think he missed his first 4 or 5 threes, and then hit a couple. And these are wide open shots that I think Randall ended up assisting him on out of that right corner. So it seemed like he was kind of getting it going. This is going to sound like a broken record, but he just seemed like things were a little bit slow for him. You had touched on some of the defensive issues where it just seemed like, Rozier is one of those shooters where he can do it off the dribble, off movement, where he just needs a split second and he can get up into a shot. And he doesn't need a ton of room. And I think that, if you're Quickley and you're a little bit slow, and he's such a great screen navigator in general, but it seemed like it wasn't a super strength today. And if you're a little step slow, he's going to get up, and if he's making shots, it's going to be a tough night. And then offensively, it just seemed like things were a little bit slow for him in terms of processing. And I thought that there was a couple of moments where late in the game, he had open 3-point opportunities and he either passed them up, or there was one where he tried to draw the foul really late in the game. I think it was the Knicks were down 3 at this point, where it just seemed like he could have pulled up for a 3-pointer, ended up taking it in, tried to draw the foul. He didn't. And I think Randall got called for that offensive foul on Rozier eventually. But it just seemed like some of the decision-making wasn't at its best. And, if the shots aren't falling for him and, from 3 or from that floater range, he's not a dynamite rim runner. He's not going to guy that's going to be able to drive and generate a ton of looks in that way. So things will be tough for him, but it's hard to criticize him too much because he's been on such a great streak. And then, that Boston game where he played 45 minutes straight without a rest. I mean, he deserves, some sort of a benefit of the doubt for a poor effort, but I think he was just part of a group that was just tired, and it just didn't seem like they had that extra gear, as I mentioned earlier, to stave off a team that was just playing harder and wanted a little more.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I think there was certainly some good stuff there, and like he was able to leverage his speed in interesting ways, and I want to talk about that in just a sec. I want to talk about Quickley and Grimes, who I thought this was a sneaky good performance for Quickley and Grimes, but we will take one final break, and then when we return, we'll get into all that on Locked On Knicks. The midway point of the NBA season is here. Now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained, even the sixth man of the year. We told you guys to get in on it about a week ago. Might be too late now because Emmanuel Quickley's the overwhelming favorite. But if you want to do another crazy Knicks bet, I don't know, maybe throw some money down on the New York Knicks to win the Eastern Conference. It's not as crazy as I thought it once was. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Emmanuel Quickley. Obviously the shot was not really there, but it's interesting. Like even when he's not shooting well, not playing that well, like you still see and he just didn't against Boston. He all these self-created buckets where he would just literally go coast to coast, and Boston would be like, "What are you really this guy's 6'3". He's gonna dribble through our whole defense." And Quickley was like, "Yep, that's what I'm gonna do." And he didn't really get to that point tonight because he probably just didn't have that in him. But he had another one of those off a rebound, kind of like a self-created fast break. This was early second quarter where he just kind of dribbled through the lane and caused so much chaos that he eventually kicked it out to Quickley and Grimes, and Rozier did a crazy blind closeout on Grimes, ended up fouling him. And that was, it was obviously a good play by Grimes, but it was a product of Quickley just sort of putting a whole defense in disarray by going fast. And I think the Knicks just desperately need that element of unpredictability injected into their offense. They're getting it now with Josh Hart. And I think that's been a giant part of this 9-game winning streak, where Hart again tonight had a couple buckets like that, where he just never stopped when he was in semi-transition. It didn't really matter that there were 3 guys in front of him. And he kind of just did the Adrian Peterson thing and just put your head down, barrel down the middle, get to the rim, finish. And then Quickley even had another one where he had back-to-back plays where the shot clock was down to 2 seconds, and he got an and one on Terry Rozier, and he had another play where his shot was blocked, but Mitch caught it and jammed it in. It was because IQ forced the big to commit just by just jetting in with no time left, and his speed is just an element of his game that I think he can continue to weaponize more and more. And he's just sort of realizing all right, I'm even by NBA standards, I'm special in this category, and I can create some offense out of that. But What do you think of Quinn Grimes tonight? Because I thought that was sort of the sneaky, like, negative, I'm overusing that word, negative storyline of the Knicks 9-game winning streak was that Grimes had sort of lost all of his aggressiveness, like all of his off the dribble verve that, like, when he first came into the starting lineup, all of us were swooning over. And tonight it felt like a little bit of that was back, especially in the first half.
Yeah, he got there was a couple of closeouts where he was able to get all the way to the basket. Hit a couple of threes. One of the things that I'm sort of just keeping an eye on, and it's a little bit of a concern, where if you look at his shot chart, he is absolutely elite from the left corner or the left wing, and then all his shot zones from whether it's top of the key, the right wing or right corner, he's really bad. And it's just something that I'm tracking. I don't know if it's a small sample size thing, but I think I looked at it. He was 3 for 21 coming into the game from the top of the key. Wow. And, he's their main floor spacer in the starting lineup. So to be at that level and to be an elite role player, he's going to have to be a little more versatile in where he can make shots around the court. You can't just be a guy that's going to be awesome from that left wing or the left corner, because then teams he's that closeout ability and that ability to get all the way to the basket only works when he's got that, when he is a threat of a shooter. So I think that is going to start to be a little bit of an issue if he doesn't figure that out. I don't really have any concerns that he won't figure that out. It might be just a small sample size, but this year that has been something that has kind of creeped up a little bit. And he had, I thought, on a positive side, the play of the night in terms of that fast break, reverse layup at the end of that second quarter. And it just seemed like it was a big play, sort of, got the team in the locker room up 16, I believe. And it seemed like they were going to be on their way to a 20-plus point victory, or at least one that wasn't going to be close in the second half. And then we all know how that ended up turning out. But I thought he was really good. And it just seemed like he was a guy that didn't seem like he was, sort of like running in mud or cement. He didn't play as many minutes against Boston, and just seemed like he had a little bit more juice to him. And he only played 28 minutes tonight. So maybe, again, we talked about those adjustments earlier in the conversation regarding Tibbs. Maybe this was a night that, Grimes plays 35 minutes, just because it seemed like he was at least moving in a way that was generating a little more energy and juice to this ball club that was sorely needing it. So, yeah, I thought he was fine. Again, the shooting percentage wasn't great. He was a minus in the plus-minus category. But overall, I just thought he was solid. He had a couple of nice assists. And, as I mentioned, a couple of closeouts. He even had that one play where it was like that baseline Jordan move where he kind of fakes going. He's baseline, fakes going towards the middle, and then reverses course, goes back towards the basket, which was a really kind of like eye-opening move that he pulled out, and it didn't end up finishing with points. But he kind of shows every game that he's got a little more to him than sort of he has shown this year. Every and now and then he's going to do something that's a little bit surprising, because I think he's got a little more in his bag than he's shown. But overall, a solid game, and just I thought that he could have played a little more. I thought in the second half they could have used him, more than he played.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on the bag point in particular. I mean, he had on the play where he got Mitch the dunk, he had it was very subtle, but like he got a step on Gordon Hayward, and then this was out of the left corner, and he turned back towards the left wing and looked out at IQ for a second. You saw Hayward kind of like half look over there too, and then Grimes was gone. Grimes was by him. Hayward didn't have a chance. Big had to commit, slipped to Mitch, like automatic pass for Grimes at this point. He's he's right there with RJ, right there with IQ. It's just being fantastic at that element of his game. And I think my hope with Quentin Grimes is we're seeing a similar developmental pathway to what we've seen with Emmanuel Quickley. Now we're DJ. I think we were probably both in the same spot last year with Quickley, where you still saw the flashes, but you're like sort of like, this is almost a downgrade from his rookie year, where he got to play a little bit freer, and he had just like these wow flashbulb moments. And with Grimes, I think maybe early on there was a bit of that, and he certainly had I can't remember. He had the one game, maybe it was the Mavericks game, where he was just cooking. But we haven't had as many of those as you would think, given that last year, like I can't remember, he finished the season playing 35 games, and he had 4 or 5 games that made you kind of like question, like, all right, is this guy, did we get Desmond Bane somehow? And then this year it doesn't seem that way, and it seems like he's stagnated. So I'm wondering if like maybe there's more meat on the bone there in year 3, 4.
Yeah, it's tough, I think, for him, because he'll go stretches, 10 minutes where he won't get a shot. And
Yeah.
they ran a play early on. I think it was his first look. It might have been one of the first couple plays the Knicks ran where it was a movement. He was in the left corner, and he's really good shooting going to his right because he's kind of the way his form is, he's like a right hip shooter. So when he's moving to his right, his balance and his alignment is very much going right to the basket. So he's really good going off movement to his right. And they ran a play. I think it was a dribble handoff with Randall, if I'm not mistaken, but it was a sort of movement play, getting him a shot, getting him a look, get him some rhythm early on. He ended up making it. But, it just seems like those plays are few and far between. And I just don't know if there's much that Tibbs can do to change that, where he's the fourth, fifth option at times, depending on who he's sharing the court with. So I think for him, it's just going to be a struggle in terms of just keeping his rhythm. And I think Obi is feeling that for sure. Obi's 3-point percentage has tanked as the season has moved on because he just, when you're playing 12 minutes and you're getting a couple of looks and that hook is coming, I think it's just very tough. And I think Grimes to a lesser extent than Toppin, but I think he might be feeling that when you're just going a long stretch without getting a shot up, it could be a little bit detrimental, but he doesn't change how he plays defense. And when he can attack a closeout, his passing is always there. So I think, overall, I think the season's been positive for him. Maybe in a couple of years, he'll start to blossom and be able to show more depending on the roster construction. But right now, I think he's doing his role well. And I'd expect some of that shooting, the 3-point shooting numbers, it's not bad, but he's at, 35% on good volume. But I think I'd expect that to tick up a little bit as the season sort of comes to an end, because I think he's a better shooter than he's shown this year.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and it's maybe one of the few detriments of the Knicks' depth is that for a young player trying to find himself, and especially just as much as the depth, like the Knicks' success, like he doesn't really have room to test the bounds of his game. And Tom Thibodeau, who deserves a lot of credit, because generally the Knicks seemingly, Emmanuel Quickley, shining example, have had pretty good player development under him. But Grimes, it just feels like in a season that now has become like, oh, we might win a playoff series. Like there isn't really room for him to poke and prod and test those boundaries. And it sort of makes it all the more incredible that Emmanuel Quickley is kind of just ran down that door and found a way to do so. And that is as positive of a note as I can think to end this night on, when the Knicks somehow lost their 9-game winning streak to the Charlotte Hornets of all team. But DJ, thanks for making this a pleasant experience despite the game. Before I let you go, can you just tell everyone one final time where they can find all your work and just anything you have coming forward, either for Knicks Film School or for your personal channel?
Yeah, just follow me on Twitter, ACE_Zullo, ZULLO. I have a link to my YouTube channel. You can also search in the YouTube search bar, Craft NBA. You can get I think I have 33 videos at this point. I'm going to try to come up with a new one either this week or next week on sort of when certain players and how they reject screens, go away from screens. Jalen Brunson is great at that. John Morant's elite at that. Zion's actually really good at rejecting screens. So just a video on certain players and how they sort of decide when to go with the screen, go with the screen, or go away, reject that screen. So I thought it's going to be pretty interesting. But yeah, doing some work for Knicks Film School, but all my stuff will be on Twitter, ACE_Zullo. So you can just follow me there and you'll get everything.
All right. Thanks so much, DJ. Thank you for all of you who tuned in and have been tuning in. It's been a great month for us, so we really, really appreciate all the support. And we'll be back with one more episode with Dallas and Nico tomorrow, talking about the positive adjustments that Tom Thibodeau has made that have led to this 9-game winning streak. I ripped him a little bit tonight, but tomorrow it's 30 minutes of Tibbs positivity for all of you who love the guy. Myself may be included on that list. But until then, we'll talk to you soon on Locked On Knicks.